thought Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, named after Willie's song, Blackie and the Rodeo King. Bernie thought, it's a great name. I'll be Blackie, don't worry. I'll put you on the road. And we got great gigs for 8 months, nominated for a Juno, fell in love with each other, decided we got to keep doing this. Yeah. And that's 16 years ago. Yeah.
Musician, songwriter, record producer, Toronto-born Colin Linden has played and produced and toured with some of the biggest names in the music business like Emmylou Harris, Lucinda Williams, The Band, Leon Redbone, Bruce Cockburn, to name just a few. The hard-working leader of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings now makes his home in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where we met him at Neely's Barbecue Joint on Rosa Parks Boulevard.
Colin, I have a friend who has a cousin who is a white kid from Toronto, who at one time in his life, this guy claimed that he was a direct descendant of Son House, to everybody's amusement. And I was thinking about that as I was getting ready to talk to you, and I thought, you could make that claim, being a white kid from Toronto, and say you were a direct descendant of White House, and I don't think anybody would laugh. You seem to be plugged in to that kind of music in a major way. When in your young life did that interest start to blossom?
Well, from the time as far back as I can remember, the music that I was attracted to, and I was dramatically attracted to music from the time from before I could speak, I'm sure, I was always drawn to music that was rooted in blues. And then many, many years later, when I was 11, I got to meet Howlin Wolf.
Yeah.
And that was the life-changing event.
11 years old, you meet Howlin Wolf. Now, he was kind of a gruff guy.
No, not even a bit.
Well, he was to some people, but I guess not to you.
I think he was to people who were pulling his chain,
yeah,
or who were wasting his time.
Okay.
Or who were,
how did that meeting come about?
He was playing the Colonial Tavern on Yonge Street in Toronto. And remember, this is November 27th, 1971. Even though the artists who we regard now as the titans of blues, the forefathers and mothers of American music, of the music of the world, he was playing 6 nights in a club with a Saturday matinee. Now the Colonial had a balcony that was licensed as a restaurant, so minors could get in. And they were doing a Saturday afternoon matinee, and I asked my mom to take me to see Howlin Wolf. And we went, and I wanted to get there real early to make sure I could get a seat, and that there was no problem getting in. So we got there about 12:30 for a 3:30 show. Well, he had just had lunch, and he was just going to hang around the club until showtime. So I saw him sitting at the side of the stage. I walked through the balcony and down the stairs to the stage where he was sitting, and I said, "Mr. Wolf, you're my hero. I'm only 11, but I'd love to talk with you. Would you come upstairs and talk with me?" He said, "Sure."
Wow.
And spent the day hanging out. And from then on, every time he came to Toronto, he always took lots of time for me. He was always just so great to me.
What kind of stuff were you interested in talking to him about?
All of the things that ultimately you hang on to for a long time.
Yeah.
Where did you learn how to play? What drove you to do it? Who were the people who you listened to and who you liked? And he was a really easy guy to talk to, even as an 11-year-old, maybe even especially as an 11-year-old, because I think he wanted to impart some information, and I don't think that many people approached him with that kind of, those kind of requests or those kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And from the very first time I met him, he said, I'm not going to be around for that much longer, and you're going to have to carry this on. And,
really?
And he was referring, I'm sure, to my generation,
sure,
and young people, but
still,
for me, I took it personally. I said,
bet.
okay, I'm going to have to do this. This is my job. This is my mission in life. And almost 40 years later, in a couple months, it'll be 40. Less than a couple months, it'll be 40 years. It's still my mission.
Well, it's interesting that you would say that, because I read this quote from you when Easin Back to Mississippi came out. That was what?
Easin Back to Tennessee.
Tennessee, Mississippi. Sorry.
State we're
I'm
in.
thinking. Yeah, sorry. I was thinking of the Mississippi Sheiks in my mind.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I was going to ask you about them, and that's why it came to mind. Easin Back to Tennessee came out, and you said that it had been, because you do a lot of covers. You do a Son House cover. You cover a whole pile of people, Bill Carter and all these people, but you said it was your most personal album, and it had been percolating for like some 15 years in your head, and you
a lot more than 15.
Even though it wasn't, they weren't for the most part your words. Some of them were, but you felt it was your most personal album. That's what you're talking about, right? Carrying it on.
Absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, the context that everything else that I do, that I've been lucky enough to do, and including produce Bruce Cockburn records or play guitar with Emmylou Harris, or be a member of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, the context that all of that exists is that every morning when I start playing guitar, what comes out is something that I learned from Sam Chapman, and something that I got from Big Bill Brunzi, and something I got from Reverend Gary Davis and Blind Blake and Blind Lemon Jefferson, Robert Johnson. That is what I do, and the context may change that it exists in, if I'm playing with somebody else, but the thing that I do is mostly play country blues.
You play every day, right? I'm assuming?
Yeah, pretty well.
Yeah.
There's some days that I miss, but I notice it when I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back then,
I want to play every single day.
Yeah. Back then, when you were 11, were you already playing then?
Yeah, a little bit. I was starting to learn chords and starting to learn how to sing, and not that I ever got very good at that one, but I started performing when I was 12.
Yeah.
So I knew a little bit, and then when I was 13. I met a few people who really helped me out a lot. A guitar player named John Thibodeau. He still performs under the name Jay Thibodeau, not in a real, he doesn't travel too much to do it, but he was great to me. Ken Whiteley was really great to me, and Chris Whiteley too, and then David Wilcox. Those guys showed me so much on the guitar.
Yeah.
And really when I met those guys and I had stuff that I could learn fingerpicking wise, that's when I just started practicing 6 hours a day.
You ended up playing with David Wilcox in his band, right? The Teddy
I did,
Bears.
Yeah,
and you
16.
You had to go. You were 16. It makes me think of Robbie Robertson, who was playing at the same age in some pretty rough places. You had to learn electric to play in his band, right?
Yep. I had that was really the impetus to want to learn how to play electric guitar. Not even just being in his band, but hearing him play, because what he did made so much sense. All the stuff that I loved about country blues came out in his playing, and there was access to this incredible world of other fantastic music. So he was incredibly inspirational to me, and very, very good to me.
When you toured with Leon Redbone early on, did you not?
I did.
Tell me a little bit about that, because he's back. He's touring again, as you and I are talking. He's touring, and that's probably the first time in a very long time. But back then, that was when he had just broken. He was at his peak. What was that tour like?
Oh, it was great. It was a tour of Tom Waits and Leon Redbone, double bill.
Oh, man.
Which was an interesting thing. I had met Leon at Fiddler's Green Coffee House on Eglinton Avenue in Toronto when I was 12.
Okay.
I did a guest set when he was the feature performer in August of 2000. In August of 1972.
Okay.
And
he did a guest set as a 12-year-old.
Yeah, and that was when I met him. And he was, I didn't know him, or I knew about him, but I didn't really know him. But he was really nice to me, and he always was. He left Toronto fairly shortly after then, I guess. But when I started playing festivals, he was playing festivals, and as I was learning how to play, he'd take time, I'd hang out with him, and then he made a really great record with the original Sloth Band. Ken Whiteley,
the Whiteleys,
Chris Whiteley, and Tom Evans, and they played great on that record. And when he was touring with the record, those guys, I guess, couldn't do it, and he had a couple different people in the band who he was trying to get the right combination of players, and he was going to audition clarinet players, and he wanted somebody who could play solos, who he could count on, who knew the songs, knew the style. So they got me to fill in, and I ended up doing, I guess, 16 shows on that tour.
Right.
And had I think it was 16, had a great time.
One of the things that I think is interesting is that your love of this music and your devotion to your art obviously has an impact on other musicians that you meet. My sense is that musicians who are really into what they're doing, when they meet other musicians like that, there's almost an immediate bond. Because I look at over your career, and all the people that you have either produced or performed with are, frankly, people that I listen to a lot, and they all, in my mind at least, kind of share that same passion that you're talking about. Is that fair to say?
I think that's probably pretty accurate. Most of the time, I think the things that I would have to offer to somebody as a producer, or as a player or a co-writer, are things that it's not because I've had a whole bunch of hits or anything,
right,
or because I'm the new kid on the block or anything like that. It's that kind of thing is what draws somebody to you and draws you to somebody, and you find that you have chemistry and that you can come up with really good ideas back and forth, and you understand each other.
Where did the producing start?
Mostly, I gotta say, it started because I always wanted to make records, And it was just everything about being in the studio was exciting and thrilling to me. And remember, you know, this is back in a time when you couldn't just put a studio in your bedroom and start recording.
Yeah.
You know, you had to go to a place that was a real recording studio. And in Toronto,
Well,
they
with
were
the,
just
with
starting
the, I was
to
going
get
to say,
there.
with the exception of the Lanois brothers who were doing things with
Well,
egg crates in their mother's basement or something.
Well, they
like that.
did. They're
Yeah.
they're the Dan and Bob were the pioneers
Yeah.
of all, of, not all, but of so much of what's gone on now. Not even in terms of Dan's influence as a producer, which is enormous,
Yes.
Rightfully so. But they're both of them, and Bob was very, very involved in that too. You know, in terms of understanding the ergonomics of making an environment that's a great place to play music and a great environment to record music. Different things, but they blended them together in a great way. But I always loved being in the studio, and I loved recording. And some friends of mine, especially I think of Morgan Davis, you know, would call me up and say, you know, every time I go in the studio, they make me turn my amp down and turn my reverb off, and it's just I can't ever get a good sound, and I just have a lousy time. You have a good time when you go in there. You want to come in with me just to help me, you know, so I can figure out how to have a good time in there. And really, that's how it started.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting. Well, I'll ask you something that I asked when I interviewed Daniel Lanois. This is a long time ago, late 80s. And he was just starting to make his mark as a producer. And he was producing Dylan then. And he'd done, I think he'd just done U2 as well.
Right.
And I asked him what it was like, particularly when he was dealing with somebody like Bob Dylan. I said, what's it like as a producer when you're dealing with a talent that is so enormous and so widely recognized? Do you feel at all intimidated? Are you cautious about what you say? Because as a producer, you can call some shots if you want to. And he talked about making it an atmosphere where the talent trusts you as a producer. Which is that what you have to do?
That's exactly it. And that environment changes, you know, from artist to artist in the situation. But really having that trust is the only way to make something that is going to really move people.
Have you ever had an occasion where the artist wanted to do something that you didn't think was a good idea and had another route to go?
Yeah, periodically.
Yeah.
Periodically. But most of the time, no. And I find generally the better the artist, the easier they are to work with. You know, the more, and maybe that's just a matter of having confidence and being comfortable in your own skin. I mean, I've done 8 records with Bruce Cockburn, and I hope that I get to work with artists who are at his level, other artists, but I don't think I'll ever work with anybody better.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there is anybody better. And we've had such fantastic, wildly different times every time we record, and we always have a great time, and there's complete chemistry and trust between the two of us. It's never an issue, really. When well, I guess, you know, when you know somebody, it becomes a little easier, but when that exists, and oftentimes an artist will say to me, you know, why don't we try doing it this way? And it's a good way to go.
Yeah.
You know, you have to really, you can't be dogmatic about it. I think you have to understand that there is a flow that you have to adhere to, that you always have an idea in your back pocket of where it should be going and what your goal is.
Yeah.
I think that's just doing due diligence. But I think you also have to understand that the people who you are in there with are people who you want to be spending time with. Because it's your lifetime, you know.
That's
you
right.
spend hours and hours and hours and hours working on these things and working with people. You want to be working with people who you like spending time with.
So when you do your own stuff, when you do your own albums, and you've got somebody else producing you, what's that like then?
I don't
Do you feel
usually
like-
have somebody producing
You don't,
me.
eh?
No, not that I wouldn't,
Yeah.
but so far I haven't. Here's the thing, though. The people who are in the studio with me a lot of the time are people I've worked with for a really long time. Not on every record, but my friend John Wynott, who is a brilliant engineer, a great producer himself, and a great player. We've worked together for 27 or 28 years now. And sometimes we've co-produced my records, but a lot of the time it's just, he can only spend a few days working on it, so we don't, but that's very close to that kind of relationship. And also Gary Craig, who's been in my band for 27 years, John Diamond. Those guys they make huge contributions to what I do. And of course, the greatest musician I ever played with was Richard Bell, who was my best friend. We played together until he passed in 2007 for 18 years. And those guys were not shy about letting me know what they thought. And it was good.
Which is a good thing,
It was
right?
really good,
Yeah, as long as you can take it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, we're all there, we start with kind of a basic principle that we're happy to be there. And, you do think about it sometimes. You think, is the magic working still, Are they sick of how I play guitar, after all these years? Are they sick of my songs? But generally, it's been pretty good.
I want to take you away from music just for a second and ask about George Ciavallo, because we had George on this program. We sat and talked with him for an hour last year, and you wrote a song about him way back in the 90s in one of your albums, but you also narrated a documentary about his bouts with Ali, right?
Yep.
What's your fascination with Ciavallo?
Well, I thought that he was not only a championship fighter, but he was a championship human being. That he was someone who had a tremendous amount of grace and humility in the face of a great deal of personal adversity.
Overwhelming adversity.
Yeah. And I found that the heart and the soul that he had, that he approached his life with, was extremely inspirational. And I didn't know him when I wrote that song, but we sent the song to him, and I got a call that afternoon.
Is that right?
Saying that from him and Joanne, saying that they were really moved by the song. They thanked me, which I was very glad of. But I mean, it was done with love and respect, and I think that was obvious in the song. So it wasn't trying to poke fun at anything or make light of any of his travails or even paint him as a tragic figure or anything. I think that he was, he's too good for all that stuff. And got to know him a little bit. Haven't seen him in quite a few years, which I'm sad about. I hope I do get to see more of him.
He still looks great, I'll tell you.
He's such a soulful, spirited guy. He's like the greatest musicians I know who have been around for a long time. The gravitas that they have is only matched by their incredible love for life and great deal of humanity. George actually reminded me of Rick Danko from the band.
Oh, that's interesting.
Both the physical presence.
Yes, I was going to say physically, especially in Danko and later years.
But they reminded me of each other spiritually a little bit. And when I met George, I kind of thought these two guys are birds of a feather in some ways.
Let me ask you about film work, because you got involved with the Coen brothers and T-Bone Burnett.
Yes.
You got involved in the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou business.
Yeah.
What exactly did you do? How deeply did you get into it?
Well, a few things I did. I first got hired to teach Chris Thomas King, who's the great musician, but he was acting in the film. He played Tommy Johnson in Oh Brother. T-Bone really wanted the song Hard Time Killin' Flora Blues, Skip James' song, to be one of the key pieces in it, and he wanted Chris to sing it. So he wanted it to be really faithful to the original. So they got me to teach Chris how to play it, just like Skip James.
Okay.
And Chris is a real good player anyhow, but this is something I had spent, at that point, 25 years trying to learn how to play. Now I've spent 35 years trying to learn how to play it. But, so Chris came to town, he came to Nashville, and we had a great time together, and he videoed me playing it, and I went over every one of the moves in the song, and he learned it very well. And then when it came time to do the instrumental version of it that was going to be in the film, T-Bone hired me to do that.
Okay.
So I played the instrumental version in the film, and then they did a movie about the music called Down from the Mountain, and they got the idea to have Chris and I play together on it. So we did that, and it was really fun, and all kinds of, the touring opportunities, and, the Carnegie Hall show and the Ryman here in Nashville. It was wonderful.
No kidding. That's
so it was
gotta
a
be
great thing.
Yeah.
And then I was supposed to be on the album, but they had 18 tracks, and I think they had to trim it back to 15 or 16. So when I got the album, I realized I wasn't on it, which saddened me. But 10 years later, they've just done the deluxe edition with a bonus disc,
and
I'm the first track on the bonus disc. So I feel like I've been Zelig for all of these
seriously.
years.
But the interesting thing about that movie was that I thought, at least, and it did my heart some good, was the revived interest in that kind of music that movie
You
engendered.
see it now.
Yeah.
You see people. You see great, and I don't say that lightly. You see great young artists who are coming from the bluegrass and the old-timey traditions, who are 19 years old and 20 years old and 23 years old and 24 years old now. And you know that their introduction to it was when they were 10 and their parents were playing the Oh Brother soundtrack.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a remarkable thing to see that kind of positive change in music. I mean, you see a lot of negative changes. It's nice to see some positive changes. And, I went to the Americana conference here a few days ago, and I go to the Folk Alliance in Memphis sometimes, and there's really great young people, and you know that they got to where they are Or that the thing that drew them in was
Was
Oh
that?
Brother.
Yeah, not bad. Kind of reminds you of what the Blues Brothers did, right? When they revived the career of all those blues guys.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about Oh Brother. Some of the great artists who were involved with it, I think of Ralph Stanley and several of the other really great artists, got such a wonderful boost in their careers and got the so much more respect and adulation for what they do, and deserve it.
Yeah.
And
Let me ask you about Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, okay?
Yeah.
Because you guys got together. Were you the catalyst behind getting Stephen and Tom together for that?
Well, it was a wild thing. It actually happened. The synchronicity of it was too wild to be coincidental. I'm sitting around my kitchen table in Toronto talking with my wife. We had just sort of established our production company, and in order for us to get vested as a company, we have to come up with a project. I'd worked on a number of tribute albums, and that was becoming sort of the vogue, and they were mostly to artists who were pretty famous artists. And I say to Janice, wouldn't it be great to do a tribute album to Willie P. Bennett? Because I was Willie's guitar player for years, and even back then in 1995, I was pretty busy playing with Bruce Cockburn and doing other things, so I wasn't playing with Will quite as much. But when I woke up in the morning, I looked in the mirror, I was still Willie P. Bennett's guitar player. That was my role in life. Go to my computer, early internet days. I get an email from Stephen Fearing, who I know a little bit, but not really well, saying, hey, let's get together and do a project of Willie P. Bennett songs. So it was too weird. And it was the same day. It was literally within an hour of when I was having this conversation with my wife that Stephen sent me that email.
That's amazing.
That night, John Hyatt was playing in Toronto, and Stephen went and I went, and I'm sure he thought I was crazy, but I just said, this is an idea. This is too wild to be real, and but we thought it would be a cool idea. Instead of, because tribute bands were also pretty popular. There'd be a band called the Blushing Brides that would do Rolling Stones songs and, this kind of thing. So we thought, wouldn't it be cool? We'd just be the Willie P. Bennett tribute band. We'll get one other singer. So instead of having 12 different artists on the tribute album, 3 singers with common production. Cut all the tracks together with the same band and make it like we're a tribute band to Willie. Get Will to play on it. And we both thought, Tom Wilson's got to be the guy. Because Junk House was a really popular band, much more well-known than either Stephen or I were at the time. But Tom was always a very vocal fan of Willie's, and Tom and I had been friendly since we were kids. We were both the kind of 2 youngest kids in the folk scene in Ontario in the 70s, and we liked each other a lot. So I called him up. 15 minutes later, I got a call back, whatever you want, I'm there. So it took a little convincing. Well, actually, Stephen and I went to meet with Bernie Finkelstein from True North Records, who was Stephen's manager, just to say, do you think this is a good idea? And would you be interested in putting it out? And over the course of the lunch, Bernie convinced himself that he should do it. He started off saying, great idea for Stephen, but I really shouldn't put it out. And then he kind of got excited by it and said, I will put it out. And so he did, and he liked the record enough that he said, you guys should go on the road. We'll do some shows with this. And we thought we got to have a name for it. And Stephen thought Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, named after Willie's song, Blackie and the Rodeo King. Bernie thought, it's a great name. I'll be Blackie, don't worry. I'll put you on the road. And we got great gigs for 8 months, nominated for a Juno, fell in love with each other, and decided we got to keep doing this. Yeah. And that's 16 years ago.
Yeah. Now,
is that too long a story?
Hey, not at all, because I'm about to ask you to embellish on it now even more in our last couple of minutes. The most recent one, Kings and Queens.
Yes.
Which is duets with, in fact, I even wrote down the list because I've been listening to this thing almost nonstop. But Amy Helm, Levon Helm's daughter, who's got the greatest set of pipes I've heard in years.
Isn't she fantastic?
Cassandra Wilson, Emmylou's on it, Holly Cole, Lucinda, Mary Margaret O'Hara, Pam Tillis, Roseanne Cash, Sam Phillips, one of my all-time favorite singers, and Patti Scialfa, Bruce Springsteen's wife, though she kind of sounded like she might have phoned it in. I'm not sure about that track. But
Patti Scialfa knocked it out of the park as far as I was concerned.
So how did... it seems to me that just the sheer logistics of arranging a record like that, you just talked about setting up the band initially and what that took, but then to get all these great women singers to participate,
it was a 2.5-year full-time non-paying job.
Okay.
It existed in my mind for a long time, And I get ideas sometimes, and I share them with the fellas. We were actually on a train. We did this train across Canada in '06, the fall of '06, with the Cowboy Junkies. You know, people would pay, you know, exorbitant amount of money to come and hang out with Cowboy Junkies and us, and a few other people for 3 days, or 4 days as we went across Canada. At the same time, we were getting ready to do a show to commemorate the 30th anniversary of The Last Waltz. And Stephen and Tom and I were going to be the host band. I was going to be the musical director for it. And the only place we could rehearse was in this heated boxcar on the train. And we went into this boxcar and started playing and learned these band tunes. And there was just a great chemistry about us devoting our energy, which is considerable between the three of us, to something aside from just doing our own thing. It was very exciting. And we had gotten very vocal support for our band from Pam Tillis, who's a big fan, and from Roseanne Cash. And Roseanne had sung on one of Tommy's albums that I produced, and there were all these great female artists who we loved. And, you know, I thought, wouldn't it be great to do an album with duets on the whole, you know, with every song doing a duet with one of these different gals who has been, you know, a friend or a fan or, you know, somebody we admire who would consent to work with us. And they said, yeah, that'd be a great idea. And then about 15 minutes later, I thought, we should call it Kings and Queens. And that was really how the idea, okay, that's how it was born. And it took a little time to get it going because a lot of things went on in 2007. That was when Richard died, and it was a little hard to get my head around anything aside from that. And then in 2008, I got the call to play guitar with Emmylou Harris, and I spent a year on the road with Emmy. But all this time we were working on material, working on ideas, and when I finished up with Emmy in the fall of 2008, I sent a few emails out. I sent an email to Roseanne, I sent an email to Pam, and I said, if we're thinking about this idea, if we do this, would you do it? And both of them responded immediately, and that gave me the confidence to ask the others. I had produced a bunch of individual tracks for Lucinda Williams and was real good friends with Lou.
Right.
So I sent her an email. I had played on Cassandra's album that T-Bone Burnett had produced, and I thought she'd be fantastic. And I had just spent a year playing with Emmy and had gotten to be quite friendly with her. I mean, she's an angel.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful person.
I think literally she's an angel.
Oh, I think, you know, if I've ever, you know, she's certainly up there. But so I kind of felt with those women saying, yeah, we'll do it. It gave me the confidence to think we could actually pull it off. And it did take a lot of thought, a lot of time, and a lot of good fortune from above.
Well, the end result is just fabulous. I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. And it was good of you to give us all this time, too, today.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
I'm a blabber. I can talk for hours. You came down from Canada. Good Lord.
Hey, well, there you go.
It took you a lot longer to get here than it took me. It took me about 10 minutes.